Did you know that in 1966, the Soviet Union Luna 9 mission turned out to be the first spacecraft to ever arrive upon the surface of the moon and finish a gentle landing? Up until now, we'd only succeed in shooting items in the direction of the moon, and if we are fortunate, they would simply slam against it and ideally send a few facts back to Earth. Additionally, were you aware that the Soviet Union was the first to succeed in this little preliminary mission as well? Their Luna 2 spacecraft was developed in 1959. It was the first item ever created by humans to affect the lunar surface or any other celestial body that exists outside of Earth. I'm sure you are aware that in August 2023, Russia made another attempt at a gentle landing on Luna 25 on the moon. Although that mission failed, leaving their spaceship defenseless as it struck the Earth's surface, leaving the moon featuring a fresh crater and even another gathering of human waste for the years. Thus, that appears to be a quite drastic decline in moon landing proficiency throughout a duration where you would anticipate that Russian technology will have advanced by many times by then. It's awful they aren't winning any popularity competitions at this time. Moreover, the Japanese business iSpace in 2023 saw an effort to set foot on the moon, and we are aware that they also failed. Japanese manufacturing and technology are as excellent as it gets today on the globe, and a few years before that, India attempted a moon landing. We know they failed with Chandrayaan-2. Many of the world's most knowledgeable and astute engineers on the globe are working on this, hence something has to be there. Why is it so difficult to touch down on the moon? Greetings from strange space. Something further that you could not know is that the moon possesses a tremendous, unusual, and irregular gravitational pull, such that the Earth possesses a steady force of gravitational force throughout, even with respect to the Earth's core. Regardless of where you are in relation to the boundary, gravity begins to affect you while you're really high off the ground, but it occurs in a really smooth and steady manner. This isn't true for the moon. Astronomers have discovered over time that the strength of the moon's gravitational pull in some places is in contrast to others, which is basically generating a gravity field with lumps surrounding the edge, especially surprisingly powerful gravitational fields, which typically take places over a few impact basins, which imply that the surplus large asteroid impact mass is concentrated under these basins and is adjusting the gravitational attraction of the moon. 2019 saw scientists' confirmation of the presence of an odd bulk beneath the moon's south pole. We are not sure what it is precisely, but the surplus mass is said to be comparable to about 2 quadrillion tons. Okay, I get where your mind is at though. This might be something sort of ancient, buried beneath the lunar surface like an alien mothership. Currently, it's most likely not. However, until we are certain of what is there, theoretically, it might just be anything. More practically speaking though, this mass rests beneath the southern pole Aten Basin, an enormous impact crater with an oval form 2,000 kilometers wide on the side of the moon, and several kilometers beneath the surface. It originated about 4 billion years ago at some point when the moon was struck with something massive. And we can see even just by gazing at the moon that it's evident that it's acquired some very major hits during its existence. This most likely has made large deposits of all these mass concentrations in unexpected places. So it resulted in a very erratic and unforeseen power of gravity, which consequently will have a highly uneven and erratic impact on any type of spacecraft traveling past one of them en route to touch down on the moon. This is not the sole instance of rationale for why it would be challenging to land on the moon, albeit it's among the additional fascinating elements to think about. The initial action that you'll observe once you begin to delve deeper into the majority of history books are to see if anything has been landed on the moon, leading to a mistake. This is expected given the initial attempts. In the 1950s and early 1960s, it was really anticipated a lot, but even as NASA started their Surveyor program in 1966, which was a robotic lunar landing campaign that prepared the way for Apollo, their success rate was not particularly motivating assurance. Among the 7 surveyors, midway through the operation, control was lost, and it fell with a loud boom, landing on the radio, and a second mission failed 2 minutes prior to the landing attempt. Therefore, in reality, we don't even know the outcome for that one. Clearly, when we arrive at Apollo, there was never a successful example of a human arriving on the moon, which is where we discover our first explanation for the large number of other moon landing attempts. When landings fail, humans can figure things out when robots are unable to, or at least weren't able to. Therefore, without these, the first Apollo 11 moon landing would not have succeeded. If not for Neil Armstrong's expertise as a pilot, starting as soon as the moon module split apart from the primary command module, the Eagle was not flying straight, and the computer assistants failed to make up for anything unforeseen that was merely carrying out predetermined computations. It would have brought the group into a definite catastrophe. Here is the location of Neil Armstrong, and he had to make a ditch and act like Luke Skywalker. He touched down on the moon completely manually operated using just a brief portion of rocket fuel to spare. Clearly, not every lunar landing was able to bring a retired Navy pilot with them to immediately troubleshoot issues. Thus, these self-governing robotic expeditions demand that each and every element of the task proceeds flawlessly in accordance with the plan. Otherwise, failure will happen rapidly. The moon is not too far away in comparison to the solar system's size, yet it is considerably remote enough that you can't just manage a moon lander. The typical latency, the duration of a round-trip conversation, would be roughly 2.5 seconds. And that is not nearly precise enough to accomplish a prosperous launch. All of that seems a little weird. However, taking into account that NASA has a fairly good history the last few decades of arriving on Mars, and Mars is a great deal farther away than the moon, Mars can truly be of assistance. We obtain a better understanding of why the moon is so challenging for a gentle touchdown, so that it is still incredibly challenging to land on Mars. Yet, the procedure is facilitated by the presence of an atmosphere. Mars has a lot of minimal environment, which is quite less substantial than what exists on Earth, but additionally, it is noticeably denser than the Earth's atmosphere. What we discovered on the moon corresponds to you reaching Mars by using a parachute. This parachute is the difference maker. It is unable to offer a soft landing on Mars, but it has the potential to leak at a high speed from the spaceship and give it the lander ample time to come up with a regulated and assessed descent after that. In order to complete the touchdown phase, you can utilize a basic safety features like airbags to absorb the force of a smaller payload. Bigger NASA rovers, however, have utilized a fusion of vintage rockets and a sky crane to securely transport the weight to the moon's surface. As it lacks surrounding that, you are unable to utilize materials needed for a fully forceful landings, which are highly challenging to compete even for SpaceX, which currently is producing the rocket-powered Falcon 9. Landings appear simple enough that the booster mostly on the atmosphere of Earth to regulate its fall through grid fins and aerodynamic drag. Therefore, these moon landers must go from orbiting velocity relative to zero to the lunar surface armed only with an incredibly well-timed rocket with a series of burns. That presents a significant challenge regardless of who you are. Let's acknowledge the additional location's difficulty on the moon that these contemporary missions were back in the day trying to land. The landers would take the least expensive route of resistance, thus with the initial Luna 2, there was almost a ballistic impact path. The Soviets launched their probe right in the middle of the moon's apparent side, and that's very much where they struck was dead on impact. The east-west axis centroid and roughly 30 degrees to the north of the center. And after that, when it was time for more regulated landings, just like Apollo, we'd constantly aim for a region of the moon's viewable side circling the equator. In this manner, the spacecraft are going to fly in a two-dimensional trajectory starting from the Earth's equator region and traveling directly to the equatorial zone of the moon, and then return to its flat state as much as feasible. The first people were the Chinese. We can end this cycle by attaining a gentle arrival on the moon's far side in 2019. Nonetheless, the most current lunar exploration wave, similar to the unsuccessful Lunar 25 landers and iSpace, has been aiming for the south pole of the moon. This is an area of great importance going forward with lunar exploration by humans, since we believe that these deep holes will have enormous reservoirs of water ice, which is significant for reasons other than furnishing us with a beverage. We can use the oxygen found in water for breathing, and it's composed of hydrogen, a fuel that mankind use. Hence, it follows that we must determine the best way to deploy our spaceship into a lunar orbit that is polar. We need a significantly more three-dimensional flying route. That does not imply that it's unable to touch down at the moon's south pole. The Indian Space Agency has demonstrated by the successful accomplishment of their Chandrayaan-3 mission. This was a result of having the benefit of starting off unsuccessfully with Chandrayaan-2. And the majority of individuals would concur that there isn't a better method to enhance almost anything other than by attempting, failing, and then gaining knowledge from your errors to help you perform it more skillfully the next time. Unless you're attempting a free solo-like endeavor climbing mountains, in which instance you won't be around to absorb your lessons setbacks. But that's another story. Regarding the deployment of robots to the moon, provided that someone remains willing, you can keep them to cover the mission's costs. By casting them aside and observing as we've stated, NASA failed. They had to make multiple lunar landings before they acquired success-oriented knowledge. Among the 9 Ranger flights under project from 1961 to 1965 that made an effort to land gently on the moon, only the final 3 was successful. 5 of the 7 surveyor missions landed on the moon, thus for the most part they were prosperous, and after that, of the 6 Apollo flights that were successful in reaching the moon without encountering an error, all 6 were executed perfectly. The same thing is being performed during the 21st century 60 years later. The sprint to the moon's south pole, even considering all of the incredible computing transistors, technology, and microchips, we occasionally still need to utterly fail before we can achieve success. Before we can run, we must first learn to walk. Return here with us each week for more updates on everything related to the aerospace sector and connected to interstellar exploration. Remember to give the video a positive rating if you enjoyed it today. That's incredibly helpful. Check us out in person and subscribe to Strange Space for more content similar to this.